when we see them in the open plains, they're no more than it's like looking at cattle. You think they're not very cantankerous or anything, but buffalo in the thick brush is something that really need to pay a lot of respect to. And when they get old, they often become deaf and they have bad eyesight.
Hmm.
And they also sort of rely on their keeping still as they go in camouflage. So you'll often almost walk onto them before they'll react. And they often an old bull will often react by charging at you. And we nickname them ninjas because that's literally what they are. They explode out of nowhere and definitely know how to sort you out if they want to.
These are stories of outdoor adventure and expert advice from folks with calloused hands. I'm James Nash, and this is the Six Ranch Podcast. The Six Ranch Podcast is brought to you by Sig Sauer. SIG is a leading provider and manufacturer of firearms, electro-optics, ammunition, air guns, and suppressors. For over 250 years, Sig Sauer Inc. has evolved and thrived by blending American ingenuity, German engineering, and Swiss precision. Today, Sig Sauer is synonymous with industry-leading quality and innovation, which has made it the brand of choice amongst the U.S. military, the global defense community, law enforcement, competitive shooters, hunters, and responsible citizens. Sig Sauer is also a premier provider of elite firearms instruction and tactical training at the Sig Sauer Academy located in New Hampshire. For more information about Sig Sauer and its complete line of products, visit sigsauer.com.
Well, Mike, I've been following you for years, and you're an absolute legend in my mind, if not in everybody's. And I'm excited to do this show. You had a little run in this fall that I definitely want to talk about. But tell me a little bit about yourself and what you do and where you live.
Yeah, no, thanks so much for those compliments. I'm originally from South Africa, and I finished school and went straight up to Tanzania and did an apprenticeship there, which back in those days took about 3 years.
Yeah.
And I apprenticed under kind of a legend, Danny McCullum,
Okay.
and that sort of got me going. And I worked for him for about 17 years in Tanzania, and in the interim, I was hunting in Chad and Central African Republic and Cameroon as well.
Wow.
And then about 12 years ago, I started my own deal. Um, with a partnership with Bushman Safari Trackers in Tanzania. We kind of got the premier concessions there.
Is it in the Salu or is it in Masai land?
So we've kind of had a good portfolio of concessions all over Tanzania. One in the north on the west side of the Serengeti called Maswa,
Okay.
and then Masai land as well. And then in the southwest of Tanzania called Rungwa and Kazigo. So yeah, we've kind of had some great different hunting there, different portfolios of hunts.
And Rungwa is known for monster leopards, right?
No, more monster lions actually. The
Monster
leopards there are
lions. Okay.
average size. Maswa, where I predominantly hunt, is the place where you get those really, really big leopards.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
What got you interested in hunting to start with?
Growing up, my uncles had mines with a lot of land, so we hunted there. And my father had a ranch in South Africa, so spent a lot of time in the bush and became very passionate about it at an early age. And so that's it was the foundation.
Gotcha. Well, that transition between like being a young man who loves to hunt, who loves to be out there, loves the animals and the guns and every other part of it, to becoming a guide or a PH, that's an interesting one for a lot of people because young hunters think that guiding is just like more hunting, and it's pretty different, isn't it?
Oh yeah, I know there's a lot of different dimensions to it. It's a small part of it's the hunting, and a big part of it's the marketing and traveling the world trying to get the clientele going, and then obviously conserving these areas that we love so much. That's a huge part of it, and managing those areas and putting in the infrastructure that's required, and doing all the anti-poaching work. which is
Yeah.
sort of the basis of why we do this,
Tell me what anti-poaching looks like, in the most honest way that you can.
Yeah, so like in Tanzania, our areas are normally situated between national parks and community land. We form that buffer zone. And so when we do our jobs correctly, we actually keep the poachers out of the national park. And that's kind of the science behind it. And yeah, so we obviously get more get more interaction with poachers because we're on the front line. And yeah, and that's all financed by the legal sports conservation model. And that's
Gotcha.
what finances all this anti-poaching. Yeah, so we in Tanzania we do it very heavily, and it had great success at it.
If you talk to your run-of-the-mill American and ask them about, who's to blame when we're talking about poaching problems, they'll immediately go to blaming the guy who's setting the snare or shooting the rifle. My limited experience in Tanzania showed me that those people were dirt poor. And I had a hard time actually blaming those individuals who are going out and doing the killing of these animals. It seemed to me that it was more so a problem of whoever was buying the products from them and then distributing them or shipping them overseas. Am I right in that assessment, or am I off base?
No, that's right. There's in the time I've been in Tanzania, the population has doubled,
Wow.
and so there's a lot of hungry mouths to feed, for lack of a better word. And so a lot of these people are desperate, and the they have easy access to wild places where they can easily derive an income very quickly illegally as a poacher. So it's a very common sort of career path for a lot of these local guys. And the problem is, I found this out a long time ago. When I started, I was very liberal. I felt very bad for them and what have you. But you quickly realize that you've got to choose between the people or the wildlife, decide which you want to protect. And if it's the wildlife, you actually have to draw a line in the sand, and you have to stick by it.
For
And
sure.
these areas were set up as not to have people in them. That's what keeping this habitat wild and keep is what enables wildlife to flourish. And
Yeah.
so we have to be very strict about conserving that habitat, not letting anyone in, because if we are liberal about it, the next thing it turns into farmland, and then the wildlife is gone. So we have very strict perimeters, boundaries, and we have to enforce them. Otherwise, that wildland's all going to be gone.
And Tanzania is located in East Africa along the Indian Ocean. Talk to me a little bit about some of the challenges that the Selous is facing right now. I understand that there's some dam work being proposed or being worked on.
Well, it's actually they went in and have made this huge dam for nuclear power, and so a lot of the old hunting concessions have been turned into national parks, but a lot of the wildland has been lost to this now huge lake.
That's such a tragedy to me.
No, it is, yeah. And there's more people in there than ever before. So that definitely puts not only have you lost vital habitat, but there's a lot more pressure coming in from people. And so that can be a recipe for disaster.
This area that I'm talking about that is called the Selous Game Reserve. It's named after Frederick Selous. It had, when I was there, the greatest diversity of megafauna in the world, in the whole world. And there are no permanent structures, there are no inhabitants, there are no livestock. It was, you and the wildlife and the tsetse flies, and that was it. It felt like what I imagined Africa to be, like old school Africa. So to think of that getting flooded, it's heartbreaking.
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah, but it's always sad when we lose any wildland, and that's the sort of the trend. It just every year pieces of it perish.
Yeah.
And that's why I think we have to be so firm on these protected areas, that we manage them properly and don't just let them be overrun with livestock and people, because once that happens, it's irreversible.
There's lots of people that care about African wildlife in the US and around the world that don't understand it, and they don't understand the issues that face it. So if you were to give advice to someone that said, hey, I genuinely care about, pick your animal, whether it's, leopard, lion, elephant, any of the charismatic animals, or maybe something like a pangolin, that people know less about, that are, definitely threatened by illegal activities. What's the best way for people to turn how they feel into positive action that will actually prevent the loss of that wildlife?
Yeah, it's a great question. And you see so much of people with the right intentions putting money in the wrong places,
Yeah.
and not knowing any better for it. So I always really encourage people to become knowledgeable about the organizations they fund and what they do with that money. My favorite foundation right now in Africa is Africa Parks,
Okay.
and they're incredible. I mean, they go into undeveloped countries of Africa where the government really can't manage their national parks and can't manage their wildlife, and they sort of do a partnership with the government where they come in and train the locals, and they've put in a lot of money and a lot of power, and basically turn these disaster national parks and stuff. They manage them and protect them, and
Yeah.
they've had an immense impact across Africa in some of the most destitute countries, and doing amazing things. So yeah, I mean, that's not a hunting group by any means. I think they're positive. They believe in the conservation hunting model, but they do really, really great stuff, and they understand how it works. But yeah, no, there's a lot of organizations, and the money gets funneled into the wrong places and really has irreversible impacts on Africa. And so yeah, it's do your research.
I think one of the best ways that people could make a real difference is by coming and booking a freaking hunt with you. Like,
Yeah.
Because a lot of that money is going to go into the right places. If not, like, and I'm a little bit suspect of, some of the anti-poaching funds and how those get up to the government and come back down or don't. But I know for a fact that having good PHs and outfitters on the ground has a very real impact on reducing a poacher's ability to operate. And I know that the staff that you are managing, those are people who might potentially be out there poaching if they didn't have that job with you. They've got the skill to do so. So I think one of the probably best ways that people could spend money is by spending it on a hunt with a reputable PH.
Very much so. Hunting, for lack of a better term, is a land use, just like
Yeah.
farming is a land use. Hunting is a dedicated land use, and it zones off huge tracts of wildland that would otherwise be used for agriculture or worse things like mining or coal mining, where they cut all the trees down. So rather than just thinking of it as hunting, you've got to think of it as land use. And land use, when you hunt, is ultimately protecting the habitat. That's the first thing. Because if you don't have the habitat, you don't have the wildlife. If you cut all the trees down, you're not going to have any elephants, because that's vital food and nourishment for them. So yeah, that's what hunting does. The very most basic level is it creates this land use. But beyond that, you look at any of the countries that support hunting and how the wildlife has flourished. If we look at history, it would be very silly to consider ever closing hunting. Look at Kenya, that lost up to 75% of its wildlife once they closed hunting, and they lost so much land as a result of all that community land and stuff was lost forever. And the countries that have hung on to it, like Tanzania, have these huge wild tracts of land all over the place that is dedicated to hunting, and it's really conserved wildlife in an incredible way. And so, we've got to look at history and realize how important it is.
And I get where people are coming from, even though I don't agree with their sentiment. But the same thing happened here in the U.S. in California. Excellent example in California. People, didn't feel good about hunting mountain lions anymore. They're like, we don't want to see that. We don't want any of the mountain lions to die. I disagree with that, but I understand where they're coming from. Okay, so they banned mountain lion hunting, legal mountain lion hunting. The result of that is more mountain lions were killed in the following years by state employees who were having to go out and kill these lions that were causing problems than were killed in the previous years when legal hunting was allowed. So in their efforts to prevent mountain lions from dying, they caused more mountain lions to die. It's like, this
That's
is,
right. I see that all the time.
yeah, you're loving it to death.
Look at elephants.
Yeah.
In one province in Kenya this year, there were 270 elephants shot by the government and by the locals protecting crops.
Sure.
That's in a country that doesn't support hunting. That costs them money, and that's a huge amount of elephants to lose, especially when there's no management on it. You know, they could have been young ones, they could have been potential tuskers. You know, they anything was killed, and it cost the government huge amounts of money.
I don't blame them a bit for protecting their crops and protecting themselves. And I think that there's lots of elephants out there that are causing damage that need to get killed. But why not do that with legal professional hunting that then puts money back into the community instead of taking it from it?
Exactly. You know, when you look at Tanzania, they do legal elephant hunting, and the most elephants they kill is about 10 a year. So in one province in Kenya where there's not hunting, they kill 270, and in Tanzania, legal sports hunters have only killed 10 in a year.
Yeah.
It's just so actually it just shows you that more elephants are killed in countries that don't support hunting than, you know, where they actually hunted legally and are producing huge amounts of income for wildlife, and also at the same time protecting this vital habitat.
Sure. Those 10 elephants getting legally hunted in Tanzania puts over $1 million into the economy of Tanzania, whereas those 270 are, you know, that's multiple $1 million that are being taken away from Kenya that really can't afford that. And it's bonkers to me. But I don't want to get too spun out on elephants because, you know, I got to manage my blood pressure here a little bit. So we'll move on from that. Talk to me about what you just got done doing, because you just went out and hunted a couple animals that are, I think, some of the best game meat I've ever had, being warthog and impala.
Yeah, I just walked in the door. I was actually late for this Zoom call. Came in and I was actually hunting with a 6-year-old, shooting warthogs and impala for Christmas rations for the staff on the farm.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that's what I was doing today. It was really great, and I'm all about promoting youngsters to hunt because they're the future of conservation and wildlife. So I'm all about that. I really get a huge kick out of it.
I think warthogs are the coolest. I think they're just such an amazing and interesting animal. They're funny to watch. Tell me a little bit about warthogs. You know, most people just think of like the Lion King or something ridiculous like that, but they're interesting.
No, they're really cool animals. They're abundant, first of all. You know, they in most ecosystems in Africa, you find them in great abundance, which is cool. But you know, when it comes to eating them, they're one of the most delicious meats.
Oh yeah,
I've got a recipe I do with barbecue ribs. That is just insane, you know. So, no. But more than that, you know, they're a key food source for a lot of the predators like lions and leopards and what have you. And they're neat animals. I mean, they're highly intelligent. They're very vocal. They make a lot of funny sounds, and you know, they're cool. I mean, they're very interesting to me.
Yeah, they're super interesting, and they go to ground sometimes. Like they'll get in holes.
Yes, exactly. That's right. You often see them with porcupine quills in their faces, and it's because they go into a hole that already has a porcupine in it, and they have a quarrel down there, and the warthog inevitably loses. But that's kind of a common thing.
And
But,
an African porcupine quill is no joke. That's not like you know, it's not like a needle.
yeah, that's right. When I got hit by this buffalo in October, I've been doing physio, and my physiotherapist told me that my wound is not as bad as the lady before me who was hit by a warthog.
Yeah,
And
I
she
bet.
was walking in the veld, and completely unprovoked, this warthog came out of a hole and put its tusk all the way up her leg into her thigh and into her intestine,
Wow.
and it caused incredible damage. It's not that tough big tusk; it's the short sharp one underneath.
Sure.
But it did an incredible amount of damage. So yeah, they're animals that definitely need a lot of respect. You don't want to mess with a warthog.
Oh, for sure not. And every time they open and close their mouth, that tusk and that incisor rub against each other, and they sharpen every single time they open and close their mouth. It's constantly sharpening. What a remarkable thing. You know, we see that in this piece of wildlife that's existed for a long time. And then I look at my knife and I'm like, why don't you sharpen yourself? You know?
There we go.
And impala is just like this super delicate, you know, It's fine. It's not gamey at all. It's just a very, very good light meat.
Yes, and very abundant. I mean,
Lots of
anyone
impala.
that's been to Africa knows it's one of the most common animals you see.
Yeah. And they are fast, man. A lot of times impala are getting out of Dodge.
Yeah, no, that's right. That's right.
Yeah. So I was in Africa. I was in Tanzania in the fall of 2014. I kind of wish that I hadn't left. I loved it there so much, and I was having real thoughts and conversations about ways to stay, to go to Dar es Salaam, to start that process of becoming a PH. And I chickened out and I came home, and I haven't been back. But man, I think that Cape buffalo hunting is one of the finest hunts in the world. And before we get into your story of this fall, talk to me a little bit about the animal itself and the way that hunters and then African community interact with buffalo.
Yeah. So again, it's a pretty common animal in southern and East Africa, and when we see them in the open plains, they know more than it's like looking at cattle. You think they're not very cantankerous or anything, but buffalo in the thick brush is something that you really need to pay a lot of respect to. And when they get old, they often become deaf and they have bad eyesight. And they also sort of rely on their keeping still as they go in camouflage. So you'll often almost walk onto them before they'll react. And they often an old bull will often react by charging at you. And we nickname them ninjas because that's literally what they are. They explode out of nowhere and definitely know how to sort you out if they want to.
And animals' ability to hide in that country is pretty incredible. I've hunted my whole life, and I'm used to looking for animals that are a long ways away, miles away. What I found interesting about hunting in the area of the slough that I was in is that you could have 150 buffalo that were visible, and if they were all still, they were very, very difficult to see. And sometimes they might only be 150 yards away, 200 yards away. And then all of a sudden you see a tail switch or something like that. And you're like, oh, there's a buffalo.
Yeah.
And then as you start to look, it's like, no, there's 100 head. Like this is everything that I can see. Everything that's dark is a buffalo. It's incredible.
Yeah, no, amazing. We always listen for those tick birds.
Yeah.
They always perch themselves on buffalo and eat the ticks. And that's normally the first thing you hear when you're approaching buffalo. You'll hear those tick birds buzzing and jumping up, and that's kind of gives you an indication of where the buffalo are at. But with good reason, you should listen for them because that's normally good insight to where you're going to walk into that buffalo.
That's smart. Well, tell me what happened. I want to hear this story.
Yeah, so it's actually been a really dry year in East Africa, in Tanzania especially. I mean, they say it's one of the driest years in about 40 years. And so when it's dry, everything is competing more for food and for water, and it definitely creates a more sort of cantankerous demeanor for these animals because they're competing so much. And so yeah, I started in July on my first hunt in Tanzania. And on that safari, I actually got charged twice unprovoked.
Wow.
It was a good indication of how the year was going to go. I managed to stop those bulls that were inbound at very close range.
And what rifle are you carrying, sir?
So I was carrying a Gored 458 double.
Okay.
And so anyway, yeah, I had a busy season. We in Tanzania, we're blessed with a lot of buffalo, and on every license we can shoot 3 or 4 buffalo.
Yep.
So we shoot a lot of buffalo in a season, and a typical season I might shoot about 50 of them, 50 or more. So of course, inevitably people wound them. Clients wound them, and we have to deal with the consequences of that and try to put them out of pain as quickly as possible. So we deal with a lot of sort of dangerous situations as a PH, and it was no different in October. I started a 21-day safari, and on the first day of the trip, we went out to go and shoot a buffalo that we were going to use for line bait, and we went out and we spotted 2 buffalo bulls, and so we crept up to them, and I put the clients on the sticks, and for about 3 or 4 minutes, he looked through the scope at this buffalo that was standing broadside, and he didn't want to take the shot. And finally, the buffalo turned sort of away from us, and I said, just wait. And then the buffalo turned towards us, and I said, no, don't take that shot. It's pretty easy to wound them from a frontal shot. And anyway, the buffalo ran off. So we went ahead of the buffalo and all the way around and ambushed them from the front. The two bulls walked up towards us, and again I put the client on the sticks, and the buffalo was broadside, and he waited and he waited, and as the buffalo turned out to leave, he took the shot, and so it was a sort of he just shot past the hind quarter into the buffalo's lung at a kind of acute angle and a bit too high up, and just nicked that one left lung. And buffalo can live very long on a lung shot, like a single lung shot, over 48 hours. For some reason, it must be painful. It makes them very aggressive.
Yeah,
I've not a single lung shot buffalo, and so the buffalo ran off, and we tracked it for a while, and finally I spotted it in the bushes, and I could see some blood coming out of its nostril, and so I put my client on the sticks again to shoot it, and he couldn't see the buffalo for the life of him, and so typically I should have shot it, but he urged me not to because it was his first day on safari, and he really wanted to kill the buffalo by himself. So I regret it in hindsight. I listened to him and I didn't shoot it, and of course the buffalo ran off into very thick riverine forest along the Mamaray River, and sort of now had the upper edge on us. And so we tracked it for about 4.5 hours in this thick riverine forest. And there was very little visibility. And for that reason, I was actually in the front doing the tracking and looking for the buffalo myself, because I didn't want the trackers in front of me because there's just no visibility. And this buffalo went along, and he kept zigzagging across a dry riverbed. And anytime a buffalo runs up a dry riverbed bank, you better be careful, because if he's waiting for you at the top of that bank, he's gonna have you.
sure.
You kind of always go off his track and sort of approach from above rather than straight up the path. And so he did this a couple times, and he kept going, and finally he went up another riverbed, and I followed him up. And when I got to the top, there was a very thick bush, and in the bush I spotted the buffalo. I could just see about 8 inches of him in this thick brush, and as I spotted him, he took off running out the back of the bush. And so I thought in my mind that he was running away from us. So I took a shot with the right barrel of my double, trying to break a pelvis or a hip or something, at a fleeing buffalo. Well, it turned out he wasn't fleeing. He was actually going out the back to charge at us. And so momentarily I lost sight of him. And when he appeared again, he was a few yards coming, inbound.
Wow.
Full speed towards me. And he had already dropped his horns to gore me. And so I just sort of remember his head drooped down and him looking at me through one eye as he came charging in. And so I gave him my left barrel right between his bosses on the top here, because the head was already down. And it didn't stop him. He ended up hitting me. And I grabbed the horns as he put the tip into my thigh, and just sort of held on as hard as I could and tried to stop it from going through me. And sort of lifted my weight off the ground, and the buffalo tossed me in the air, and my feet went up, and I landed on my head and knocked myself out. And I managed to shoot him in the brain, so he was actually already clinically dead when he gored me. And then He fell down on top of me, on top of my legs, and died. And so when I came around, it was probably like 10 seconds later, he was still moving. I grabbed his horns again, but he was already dead. And so my trackers came and pulled me out from underneath him. And I just remember a huge amount of pain in the lower end of my legs and my calves and stuff, and also in my thigh. And so I grabbed my double and loaded again and gave him 2 more shots just to make sure he didn't get up again.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, exactly. I couldn't stand up. I did it from the ground. So then I just lay there for a moment, because I knew it pierced me, and I was thinking, oh, here we go. Poachers' worst nightmare is whether he's got your femoral artery, or even worse, that unthinkable horrors in the middle. You can imagine. Sure. So I just lay there for a moment, and then kind of felt around to see what he had done, and I realized he had just gone right into my groin. And so there's obviously a lot of blood coming out. I called the car, which was quite a distance away, and it came straight to us. And I got my trauma kit out, and I used an application gun called a XStat, which is sort of like a tampon on steroids that you inject into the bleeding, and it really like helps stop and helps the blood clot. And I was really fortunate. Missed that femoral. Actually, that horn actually just went perpendicular with it. Missed it by about a centimeter. So I
Wow.
was really lucky. Yeah. So then got into the guys carried me to the car. We went back to camp. And I organized the medical evacuation, and then when the plane arrived, flew to Kilimanjaro to clear customs and immigration, and then to Nairobi, where I went in an ambulance to the Aga Khan Hospital. Had a team of doctors there waiting for me.
So you had to go through immigration in order to get to the hospital?
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. Added an hour in the plane to do that.
Oh,
Yeah.
your medical kit, was that from Safari Medic?
Yes, it was. Yeah.
Yeah.
Outstanding stuff. It's not cheap, but it definitely saved your life in that circumstance.
Yeah.
I never used the cat tourniquet because I figured out that my femoral artery wasn't hit, which would have been very scary. But that stuff in that kit will really save any hunter's life
Yeah.
in any
I,
continent.
I carry one from him, and I've had him on the show as a, outstanding guy. And I think it's incredibly important for people to carry a good first aid kit, to know how to use it, to know what's in it, to have it organized correctly. Because when you're in that situation where it's like, hey, maybe I just cut my femoral artery, you don't have a lot of time.
No,
You need to
about 10
be
minutes.
very, very efficient with everything that you're doing. So during this time, is your client freaking out?
Yeah, he was, and he also wasn't. I think this was his first buffalo, and I think he probably didn't realize how dangerous it was. Or what the implications of being hit by a buffalo are.
Yeah.
Uh, the doctors managed to stitch me up and what have you, and clean where the horn had gone inside of me. But it turned out where the buffalo had landed on me, it ruptured all my veins.
Oh, wow.
And there was a lot of damage just from the weight of that buffalo, which you would never think about. But that's why if you ever landed on your body, you can tell why your spleen would rupture and what have you.
Right.
They're just incredibly heavy. And so I ended up having a deep tissue thrombosis in my calf from where he landed on me. And, they were worried about a pulmonary embolism. They put me on blood thinners and all that sort of thing. But it's something you wouldn't even think about.
Yeah.
It's just so big and heavy.
There was a fella here a couple of years ago that fell out of a tree stand. But he had a harness on, but he didn't have the system quite right. So he ended up upside down, and he couldn't ride himself. And he was there for a couple of days. His pants came down, the bees were eating him. He was defecating on himself. Like, this was a horrible scenario. And he was fading in and out of blacking out and being awake. And some other hunters found him, and thankfully they didn't cut him down. Like, they went and got help and came back, because as soon as they brought him down, boom, he had a heart attack.
Really?
Because he had all these blood clots, right? He had all this pooling in his legs and stuff where this harness had pinched him off. So yeah, pretty incredible. I don't think he's doing super well now, but he's alive, and that's better than nothing.
Really? Yeah. Wow. That's interesting. Yeah.
Gosh, I'm so glad that you had that kit, that you had, sounds like your trackers and your driver, sounds like you had a good team. Oh my God.
Particularly lucky. It's been a terrible season for PHs. I think we counted the other day, there's been 12 incidents in Africa.
Wow.
Which is one of the highest ever.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I think it just comes to such a dry year. I said, it's just a combination of desperateness on the animal's part.
The same thing happened here last year. It was incredibly dry. Animals were really stressed. I ended up killing a black bear that charged me with a pistol while I was guiding elk hunters. And I've had black bears bluff charge me and stuff before, but this was immediately a different scenario. As soon as he came out of the brush, it was ears pinned. It was a flat body that was moving fast. This animal had decided right off the bat that it was a sure enough charge. At least that's what I think. I killed it at 8 yards before it had a chance to stop. And I get a lot of criticism. People are like, well, how do you know it wasn't a bluff charge? I don't. Wasn't really willing to pay the price of admission.
End of the day, human life's worth more. It's not worth testing that.
Yeah. I had a bear tag. It was bear season. It's a dead bear. I put my tag on it and move on with my life. We found the elk that afternoon, but
what caliber were you using?
a 10 mil pistol.
Yeah, geez, that's pretty good shooting. I wouldn't want to try to stop a black bear that's inbound with a pistol.
Yeah. The crazy thing too, Mike, is typically I carry a 45-70 lever action gun whenever I'm blood trailing an animal. And the client had shot me an inReach text from his tree stand, and he'd said, smoked him, super good shot. I was like, cool. Well, I'm not going to bring this heavy ass rifle out here, when I could just bring a pistol. And I almost brought nothing at all. I thought I was just going out there to recover an elk. And, looking back, I don't know if I would have been better off with the 45-70 or with the 10 mil, because I really only had time for one shot. And I think I'm at that range with a moving target. I'm probably equally competent. Obviously, I would rather have the energy of a 400 grain bullet going 1,800 feet per second rather than a 200 grain bullet going 1,200 feet per second. But yeah, it was a fortunate thing. I don't want to claim to be any kind of pistolero. I don't know if I could replicate that shot in the future, but I'm glad it worked out.
So you'd rather be lucky than good.
Yeah, sure. Any day of the week. What would you do differently? I mean, you obviously, you're never going to know exactly where that animal is or where the trigger point is that they're going to start the charge from. But looking back on it, what are some of your lessons learned?
Yeah, always in these situations, it's not just one thing that was wrong. It's normally a bunch of different things that lead up to a situation like this. But it turned out the clients had loaded his own 375 ammunition and was way underpowered, so it wasn't penetrating hardly.
No way.
That was the first thing. Yeah.
No way.
So, then when I saw that buffalo, I told you I saw the blood coming out of its nostril.
Yeah.
And the client urged me not to shoot. I should have probably shot that buffalo, and put him out of his misery. That was the right thing to do, instead of now leading my trackers and everybody into this great danger, just because of a little bit of ego, So about whether who actually killed it in the end, So that's we do a lot for our clients to try to please them, and sometimes it's not the right thing. We feel that pressure, and of course I do too, because it's the guy's first buffalo and he wants to do it himself, and I understand that, but. I think a lot of these guys don't realize the danger that's involved in it. When you don't take that, when you have the upper hand and don't take advantage of it.
Yeah.
So then, another thing too, I'd gone 4.5 hours and my eyes were really straining at that point. I should have just taken a break and let that buffalo be for a while. I could have gone back to camp and had lunch and had a rest and come back later when I think the buffalo would be hurting more, and I would have been rested up and ready for action, instead of being tired and it was a really hot day and what have you. So that was, I think, the other thing I would have done differently. Also, that buffalo, I hit him in the brain with a solid. I actually went right through his brain, that last shot, and he didn't fall to the ground, which you would expect him to do. And it's because I used a solid. I think if I'd been using an expanding solid like a Barnes X or something, it would have been different. It would have been a lot more catastrophic damage to his brain, and he never would have touched me, So I would have rather had a different bullet in there. And then again, too, I often use a much bigger caliber, like a 5.77. I think that would have made a big difference too.
Yeah.
At that kind of range, you need a lot of stopping power. The gun I was using was pretty marginal. That's
okay.
It's a assortment of different things.
Yeah. So if you'd been shooting a 5.77, the amount of time that it takes you to recover from that recoil is a little bit greater for your second barrel. Would you have had enough time there?
Yeah, I would have, because I shot him when he was running out of the bush, and there's quite a lot of time until he actually reappeared right in my face.
Yeah.
But that's the other thing where that buffalo foxed me, is he ran out of the bush like he was running away. So I took that shot.
Right.
If I had known he was coming at me, I would have waited with both of those barrels.
Right.
And so that's kind of where he really outfoxed me, because now by the time he was right in my face coming inbound, I only had one shot left. which is not a great position to be in,
Yeah. Why double rifles?
in those really, really thick situations like that. I think I believe in them. I love a bolt action. I use a bolt action a lot. Bolt action is inherently more accurate. So at distance, you can often get yourself out of trouble by taking a really good accurate shot that you probably couldn't do with a double. And furthermore, I like having the capacity of a bolt action.
Right.
It's often good in more sort of more open environments. But when you get in that really thick brush with a bolt action, you're only actually going to inevitably get one shot off because it's so thick by the time that buffalo charges you. So I prefer a double in that particular situation because I can have two shots to let off.
Something that I've heard Alaskan bear guides talk about, some of the guides in my area that have to deal with bears and lions a lot, and certainly with African PHs, is that the guide's job is to be able to shoot something 5 yards away, and the client's job is to be able to shoot something 100 yards away.
Well, that's right.
Yeah.
When guys say, "Well, how should I practice and what have you?" As a PH, I like to practice with my big bores at really close range.
Yeah.
I want to put a really small target there at close range and be able to whack it every single time. And you develop that muscle memory for that close range stuff. That's really important because when something's inbound, obviously it's nerve-wracking, and we tend to just sort of shoot at the center of the mat quickly because we have such a limited amount of time before it hits us. And that's the wrong thing. We actually have to take our time and really, really aim small. And that's the other thing. I wonder if I shot it in a different place if it would have gone down. But I can tell you, as big as that animal is, at that close range, you need to aim very small and hit it just in the right place to make it go down.
Yeah, well, for sure. But also there's an amount of inertia there that is not going to stop. You could hit that thing with your Land Cruiser and it's still going to keep coming forward just because it's generated so much momentum, and it's a 1,600 to 2,000 pound animal. Like it's not just going to stop.
That's it. I mean, I remember my impression of that buffalo bean is I couldn't believe how tall he was when he actually arrived on top of me. He's such a big, tall animal because we always see them dead and we never actually see them standing up next to us. I couldn't believe the mass of that thing when he was standing up. Huge animal.
Well, obviously, you got hurt during this deal. You're still recovering from it, but you've still been guiding hunts in the meantime, and not just for 6-year-olds.
No.
What does the future look like for you? Going to continue guiding again next year?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, no, it's not going to slow me down at all. I've been doing a lot of physio and a lot of physical rehabilitation, and I would say I'm like 95% healed now. There's no infection, anything like that. And so, if anything, it's gonna we shoot so many buffalo, we start to think we're indestructible, and it's just a really good wake up call and makes us wise. It makes me wiser, So I think it's a good thing at the end of the day, Nobody else was hurt, and I'm still alive, So I think I'm just going to be a bit wiser this next time.
So if somebody's coming to hunt buffalo with you, next year or in years in the future, what is your expectation for the training that they put into themselves? Like, what do their capabilities need to be? How should they be practicing and preparing for a hunt with you?
Yeah, that's a great question. I always like telling my clients to go off to these shooting schools, and there's some dangerous game shooting schools that are incredible out there, And I really recommend those. I see a lot of guys going as marginal shots, and when they come back, they're very confident and very good at doing it. And so that's always a good foundation. But a lot of guys shoot off the bench and they shoot small calibers. When you move up to the big calibers that we shoot buffalo with, they flinch and they're not used to it. So I think that takes a bit of training, and also we shoot off shooting sticks. And so that in itself is a whole different ball game. So, I definitely advise clients to shoot their big boars and to shoot them off shooting sticks like they'll be hunting in Africa. That makes a big difference. It's not a particularly hard animal to hit a buffalo. It's big and it's got big, the vitals are big. So, I think anyone can do it, but it definitely takes a certain amount of confidence and what have you, preparation to do it properly.
Are your shooting sticks bipods or tripods?
So I'm actually I've sort of used them all, and I've kind of settled on the Blaser. Um, it's a sort of double pivot shooting stick, which supports the front of the gun and the back. It's a
Okay.
little bit slower to get into it and get used to it. It takes a little bit of it's a bit of a knack, but I've found since I've been using those, my wound rate has really decreased.
That's
You know,
great.
and especially like with women and kids and stuff hunting, I found that shooting stick is really brilliant.
Well, you're
Um,
doing an incredible job. If you're putting buffalo in front of your client for 3 or 4 minutes for them to have that shot, like that's freaking phenomenal, because they really need to be able to make that shot in 3 or 4 seconds.
no, that's it. That's it.
Yeah.
I always find when you take your time making the shot, it never gets better. It always gets worse.
Yeah.
You know,
That's
by
true.
waiting,
That's
it doesn't
very
get
true.
better.
Yeah.
Animal gets alerted by your presence, and it's not going to get easier. He's just going to get more and more wise and try harder and harder to get away from you.
When you're telling your story, one of the parts that really just made me cringe is when you're talking about your client not being able to find the buffalo in the scope. I think every guide ever has had that problem where it's like, I can see this thing plain as day. I can describe it to you in 7 different languages, but for
You
the
can't
love
get
of
it.
God, why can't you see it? Like,
Yeah.
and the reason is because it's hard to do if you're inexperienced. So something that I highly recommend people to practice, I don't care what kind of hunt they're going on, is to be able to find objects in their scope. Like, go out to the shooting range, look at something, and then be able to get your scope on it immediately and find your
That's right.
target in your scope. And gosh, that is such an important skill that is free to practice. That costs you $0 to practice, and you got to be able to do it, because man, it's just this major shortcoming that so many hunters have. Drives me crazy. I'm sure it does
Yeah.
to you too.
And the other thing too, when you're dangerous game hunting, when you get out of the car, load that gun, and empty your rifle is useless because the danger can be right there as you get out. But also always carry your own rifle. That lesson was learned on this incident. My client got tired and he let the tracker carry his rifle. By the time he grabbed his rifle back, the whole incident was over.
Yeah.
If he had been carrying his rifle and if it was you, I know you would have helped me and shot, and that makes a big difference. We rely on our clients too to often turn that buffalo or to help us bring it down.
Right.
2 guns is always better than one. So I didn't have any of that support in this particular incident, just because he didn't have his rifle in hand.
I was on a hunt in Colorado a few years ago, and I got extremely dehydrated and I got hurt on the way out. My back was hurt really bad, but I still had a couple miles to go, and I could do it. It was just going to take some time. And one of the guys that I was with was a Marine, and he got it. He's like, okay, we're going to go slow, but it is what it is. He knew I wasn't going to quit under any circumstances. But the camera guy, and I feel bad about this, because when he was hiking into this hunt like 10 days earlier, he couldn't do it. So he had to split his gear up with a bunch of different people. Everybody was carrying cameras and batteries and his boots and whatever else just to get him in there. So on the way out, he's seeing me struggle along, and he says, "Hey, I can carry your rifle for you." And I looked at him, and my filter was gone at that point. I was like, "I'd rather die." And and it's 100% true. Like, there's not a circumstance where I can carry him myself that I'm going to let somebody else carry my rifle. Like, no way, not happening.
That's it. I cringe when I watch these videos and see other professional hunters walking around with their tracker carrying their gun.
Ugh.
These incidents happen in split seconds. There's
Yeah.
no time,
No
and
time.
you've got to carry it yourself.
Oh man. Mike, are you going to be at any shows this year in the States?
Yes, I'm coming to Dallas Safari Club.
Okay.
And then I'm actually speaking at the Las Vegas Safari Club. And then I'm
Great.
going to Nashville. Yeah, so I'll be
Okay.
at all the big ones. Yeah.
Good.
And what about yourself?
I'll be at Western Hunt Expo for sure. I don't think I'm going to go to Dallas or SCI, and I haven't gotten the rest of my show schedule yet. Might be going to SHOT. I just don't know yet. I've got a meeting on Monday to determine what my show schedule is like. But yeah, if people are interested in hunting with you, if they want to see East Africa, well, it's still East Africa. if they want to experience this wildlife, these animals, get to know firsthand how delicious a warthog is, or how just fascinating it is to go over one hill and see waterbuck, and the next hill to see impala, and the next hill to see buffalo, and the next hill to see, the incredible number of different wildlife that are there. If somebody wants that real African experience, and they want to go with you, with a PH that's been there and done it, and cares about the animals and cares about his clients, how do they get a hold of you?
Best by email. It's MikeFellSafaris@icloud.com.
Okay.
And best way to get in touch with me.
We'll put that email in the link, as a link in the podcast description. So if people want to reach out to Mike and book a hunt, or just tell him thank you for being a pillar of modern masculinity, then do it.
Well,
Sir, I appreciate your time very much. I appreciate the story. I love a good hunting story, and the best hunting stories in the world involve buffalo where things are going wrong. I'm just sure of it.
Yeah, they have a knack of doing that. That's for sure. No, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. Thanks for your support.
Thank you, sir. Talk to you soon.
Thanks, Ed. Bye-bye.
What I remember is getting up in the dark, shuffling on out to the pickup and climbing in, heading out, headlights going out over the fields and the roads, and getting back into the mountains and the timber, and knowing that there was a destination out there that I was going to be sharing with my dad. And at some point, either during the drive or once we got out to some ridge that we were going to be watching when the sun came up, you'd hear that little squeak of the lid coming off of the thermos. And then you unscrew that top part a little bit, pour that coffee or hot chocolate into a cup, and you can just see the little tiny vapors of steam coming off of it, curling up into the morning, and holding on to that thing like it was a prayer, and blowing some of the heat off of it, and taking that first hot drink in the morning, and then the same thing that evening, because if there was anything left, it was still going to be hot. Like, those are core memories. Those are part of growing up and part of being an adult, and then sharing that. Now, I'm getting to share that with my nephew and giving him those experiences. And it's an accessory to the experience. But part of what I remember about hunting and working with my family as a little kid was that there was this green, beat to hell, still going strong Stanley thermos. And now there's a complete line of Stanley products out there. And if you go to stanley1913.com, you can look into those and see if there's something out there that you need, or that you want, or that you would like to give to somebody else. And if you use the discount code 6RANCH, the number 6 and the word ranch, and you can get 25% off of just about anything in their store. I encourage you to do it. They're great supporters of this show. They're great supporters of this audience. I love you guys. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you for all of your support and your attention. We're not stopping. We're going strong. And I'm glad to pass along this discount to you guys. And I hope that you find something that can help develop that core memory for you and the people that you love. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and share the show with a friend. You can also rate the podcast and leave a review. Your support allows me to keep doing what I love, which is meeting incredible folks and sharing their stories with you. For more content and photos, follow the show on Instagram at 6Ranch Podcast, or me at 6Ranch Outfitters. This episode was produced by Emily Brannigan, with original music written and performed by Justin Hay. Art for the 6Ranch Podcast was created by John Chatelain and digitized by Celia Christofferson. Tune in every Monday for a brand new episode of the 6Ranch Podcast. I'll catch you next week.